Hello and welcome to another gameplay commentary video for GiantSlayerTV. Today I'll be watching a game from the perspective of Faye on patch 12.5b. This game was played on Wednesday and is in a Diamond Masters MMR bracket. With such a long time between major patches, it means the meta has settled into a predictable place. Most compositions are well known by this point, so it all comes down to execution. But sometimes the luck of the game spices things up, which we will see in today's gameplay breakdown. We'll be focusing on the key parts, but mostly combobulating our way through the game. With that little teaser, let's go ahead and get started. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments and shows with plenty of exciting content to come. Be sure to also follow our GiantSlayerTV social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. As usual, we're starting off with the opening carousel in regards to component priority and gameplay goals. The meta has been figured out, so there's not too much consideration required when it comes down to component and item priority. It mainly comes down to player preference because, at the end of the day, what you're likely to play influences your choices. They generally prefers AD comps like Aurelia or Draven, so bow, sword, or glove are at the top of her list of priorities. Bow turns into multiple items, but one of the stronger items is Giant Slayer, especially since it's slammable early. Another thing Faye tries to strive for is win streaking, and building an early Giant Slayer can help with that. Keep in mind it's okay to not get the early component that you wanted. There's far too much importance placed on getting the correct component, and honestly, it doesn't make that much of a difference. Really briefly, let's talk about the goals for this game. As mentioned, Faye prefers AD carries and usually aims for an endgame board utilizing Aurelia or Draven. That is her goal for this game, though the way it unfolds is certainly interesting. First major decision of the game is, of course, the 1/4 augment. Augments in TFT have become a bit one-dimensional? Not so much in their impact or what they do, more so in that the player usually has the illusion of choice. The best option is often obvious, and deviating from that is considered the unoptimal choice most of the time. This applies to the 3 augments that Faye has as options. Ascension is a decent combat augment, particularly in the early game where fights are long. It's not a direct increase to the strength of her board, and by the time the bonus damage kicks in, she may not be able to win the round anymore. So this puts Ascension as a potential pickup, but not ideal. Socialite Heart presents the conundrum of whether or not committing to Socialite early is worth it or not. In general, no, it's not. Even though Faye was able to scout and see where the Hex is, it's far too early to commit to Socialite, especially when the Hex is in the front row. There's certainly merit to playing Socialite later, specifically for Aurelia, but it's not really a valid option this early into the game. Plus 15% damage is nowhere near as valuable to winning early rounds compared to the Ascension 50% team-wide buff. That leaves us with Disintegrator. Disintegrator was nerfed to be far less effective, but at the end of the day, it's going to help the most in the immediate combat power. It's by far the best option, though as we said, Ascension is definitely worth considering. In the end, Faye does choose Disintegrator, which pairs well with the auto-attack champions she currently has. Let's briefly discuss the minor decision on 2-3 to put in Mercenaries. It's still early in Stage 2, so having Mercenaries on board can be a good thing. Take note that Faye has already won 2 rounds and has a relatively strong board, meaning she is likely to win. Does playing Mercenary matter if you're winning? Not particularly, other than gaining an extra gold per win. This leads to the question of whether or not pivoting to lose for mercenary value is ever worth it or not. The answer depends heavily on the lobby, and for this one, Faye's board is clearly one of the stronger ones, meaning there's no reason to throw away a potential 5 win streak for a chance at a mercenary payout later on. But these types of decisions are always worth considering, even if they ultimately don't lead to anything substantial. The next important decision of the early game is whether Faye should level to 6 on 3-1 or not. Being on a 5 win streak and 40 gold puts her in a dominant position within this lobby, and pushing that advantage by leveling is often a good way to put pressure on the other players. Basically using your board strength to be a bully. There are, of course, some risks. The main one is losing, and now you're on the same leveling curve as the rest of the lobby when 3-2 rolls around and your economy gets weaker. That's why it's crucial to be sure that you can win the round when leveling before the standard time, especially if it costs extra gold, as is the case with level 6. It's worth noting for this particular decision, Faye managed to hit Corki 2 and has Jarvan 2 on the bench. Leveling to 6 may not even be necessary, though it will definitely help outright win the round against practically everyone else in the lobby. Ultimately, leveling and playing another 2-star champion is the correct decision. One last thing to note, don't instantly level to 6 when it's early. Waiting until the round is about to begin means other players have less of an opportunity to level themselves to try to match your board strength. This is also important to keep in mind on 3-1 when scouting, as some players level right away, giving you important information as to what their plan is. There's very few opportunities in TFT to hide information, so always try to take hold of these moments when possible. The teaser moment has finally arrived, with the next crucial decision being the 3-3 augment. And what a spicy treat we have here, as one of the options is Recombobulator. Spoiler alert, this is the augment that Faye chooses, but let's discuss the other two first, as well as when you should be taking Recombobulator in general. Second Wind is an alright combat augment, but has problems, namely in that your board has to live long enough to gain value from the heal. Much like Ascension, it's not an immediate power boost and relies on the fight lasting long enough and going your way to win. Faye has a strong board, meaning it's likely to help her win rounds she's more than likely going to win anyway. Basically, Second Wind is more like a win more augment than a help win augment. Makeshift Armor is a more generic catch-all defensive augment that can do well at tier 1, but it's nothing special. Had Faye been playing Innovators at this stage of the game, Makeshift would have been a real contender because the bonus defenses apply to the Innovator summon. Outside of that situation, it's not that great of a choice, though it is an instant boost in stats, which is helpful. The main issue is that it won't apply to your item holders, which is usually the ones that you want to live longest. Then, there's Recombobulator, the option that Faye goes for. This augment has incredible potential to swing games into a player's favor, but also has the potential to do the opposite. It's a risk, but one that you as a player can weigh the options for. The position Faye is in, is it worth the risk to use the Recombobulator? That's hard to say, but in this game specifically, yes! 2 free 4-cost units, a 2-star 3-cost unit, and finally a pair of 2-cost 2-star units. That's a ton of value and instantly raises your board strength, even if it's at the risk of losing cohesion. Will this play always work out in the player's favor? Heck no! But that's TFT, baby! We out here taking risks. All in all, we see the results, which oddly enough ended up being a rather cohesive board with Ahri, Vex 2, and 2 Swain 2s. One of the benefits of doing this play was the fact that she had generic items with Giant Slayer and Warmogs. Giant Slayer is useful on any damage dealer, while Warmogs is fine on any frontliner, so this was one of the best times to use Recombobulator. If you thought the Recombobulator was a major turning point in this case, well, we have a surprise for you. A twist almost like we're in an M. Night Shyamalan movie, Faye is given a potential transition into VIP Draven. She already has Ahri with a relatively cohesive board, is making this pivot a dangerous move. Yes, it can be, but objectively speaking, a VIP Draven with Giant Slayer, one that you can 2-star at level 7 on 4-1, is usually a better play than sticking with Ahri 1 that may or may not get perfect items. Sure, the rest of the potential Draven items are up in the air, but Giant Slayer with VIP makes Draven hit like a truck. We should point out that it's not incorrect to stick with Ahri given Faye's board is cohesive for Arcana Syndicate, but it's also not incorrect to pivot. The point is, be willing to pivot if given the option, not that you have to. As we see, Faye takes this opportunity and runs with it, and, spoilers, it ends up being the game-winning move. Draven 2 will stabilize her board so she can stay above 50 gold, level 8 at a reasonable time, and even go to 9 later on. Sticking with Ahri has merits, but ultimately would not have resulted in the same outcome simply because it's harder to stabilize with an Ahri 1 than it is with a VIP Draven 2. That said, there are some growing pains due to pivoting into Draven without a board to support him, so that's also worth taking into consideration before making that pivot. Time now for the final augment decision of the game. 4-6 augment is rarely a difficult choice, though it's certainly impactful. In this case, the obvious option is Portable Forge, as Jeweled Lotus, while useful, doesn't matter much for Draven. Arcane Crest could have been amazing had Faye stuck with Ahri, but since she did not, Portable Forge it is. There is, of course, a risk to using Portable Forge, because not every Ornn item is equal in value, nor is every Ornn item good on a carry like Draven. In this case, the 3 options are Randuin's, Infinity Force, and Zhonya's. For Faye's current board, another defensive item is not necessary. Zhonya's can be an option on Draven to prevent him from getting one-shot, but at the end of the day, Infinity Force provides the most amount of stats, and that's what matters the most for Draven. With that, the major decisions of the game have been made, besides a couple of smaller ones before the game ends. One such decision is on 6-1 when Faye has the opportunity to level to 9. Level 9 is always a difficult decision in most games because, honestly, there's not usually much gained by leveling. Sure, you have a better chance of hitting a 2-star 5 cost, but outside of that, unless your composition is severely lacking in a certain area, one champion won't make or break your board. In this case, there's not much to be gained by rolling on 8 for Faye, so leveling to 9 is an easy choice. That said, she doesn't really gain much from leveling, so it could be argued that slow rolling on 8 would have been a better usage of her gold. In the end, this isn't a hugely impactful decision on the game, but leveling to 9 should always be thought about carefully. The final round of the game is here, and the only impactful play to be made is, of course, scouting and positioning. There's not much else to do in the late game, so always be diligent with your scouting. In this case, we see the enemy's most important unit is Aurelia, and they're frontlining them. This means for Faye that having Draven smack away on that Aurelia is likely to win the round. Another thing to note is not having the Echo with Frozen Heart jump onto Draven, as you want him to ramp up quickly. As the fight plays out, Faye's positioning ends up being the deciding factor, and she takes the win in first place in the lobby. And that's a wrap for this gameplay commentary, folks. As always, our goal is to learn from these games, so what were the key moments in this game to look back on? The two most important decisions were by far taking Recombobulator on 3-3 and then pivoting into Draven on 4-1. Even though the units from Recombobulator were short-lived, it's important to note that Faye's board did get much stronger because of it. Had Draven not shown up, or if Faye decided not to pivot, the play on 3-3 with Recombobulator could have been game-winning. But the interesting part of this game is that it wasn't. Instead, deciding to pivot into Draven despite having a cohesive Ahri board is what ultimately led to the win. Of course, we can't ignore that hitting Draven 2 on 7 is a high roll, but the decision is what's important. That provided stability, allowing Faye to level to 8 and put together a well-rounded comp. Overall, today's game was less about identifying mistakes and more about highlighting decision-making. It's not possible to make the correct decision every time in every game, but when you have impactful decisions like the Draven pivot, it's important to think back on why it worked and keep that in mind for future games. Let us know in the comment section below what you'd like to see in our next gameplay commentary video. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.